Hey, what's going on, gang? Nate on the Stone here. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to the 90th edition of The Rolling Stone, which is pretty amazing if I ever sit down to think about it, which means I hate to do this, but I have to start this 90th episode with a mea culpa. Gang, I apologize profusely that I have not yet gotten our On the Stone video up. This is the one where I was going to give people some actual concrete pieces of advice of what we all could do to start actually resisting, to start gestating the next revolution that is going to be needed to save our country and Western civilization in general. It's what I promised that was going to be the next video in my last video, the one where I talked about how the conservative movement, whether you talk about the establishment or what I call the estabulary, has basically failed us and they can't be trusted and they can't be counted on. I wanted this next video with the practical advice. I actually wanted it up this week. And it actually was going to be going up today, March the 5th, on the anniversary of the Boston Massacre, which would have been apropos, or at least so I thought, but anyone who makes videos will know this. There are some videos that you make that just go smooth as glass, and others are like trying to shove a Wolverine into a mailbox. And this video has unfortunately been the latter. I have had nothing but problems with the equipment, with programs, with the files themselves, and so unfortunately that video, it's going to go up. It is going to be the next video, gang, but that video is going to be going up at the very beginning of next week, probably Monday or Tuesday, and I apologize again. With my work schedule, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it up before then. So that is a bit of a rain cloud to start off this video. Again, mea culpa, wanted that out much sooner than what it's going to turn out to be, but I wanted to let you guys know that I haven't forgotten, I haven't reneged on my promise. It is coming. Just please a little bit more patience and a little bit more indulgence for me. Thank you very much. And on that brings us to the real meat and potatoes of this issue of the Rolling Stone, and it's chock full, gang. I have got to say that we have to first talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe it's the Grinch in the room, or maybe it's the cat wearing the red and white striped hat that's in the room. Whatever it is, we have to talk about it. And if you were starting to wonder, hey, that kind of sounds like some Dr. Seuss stuff, you would be correct, gang, because our first story actually deals with the good doctor. We just passed his 115th birthday, which was March the 2nd. So, it would have been apropos to actually celebrate the guy who has become one of the most well-loved and most successful children's author on this blessed continent. But this is the year 2021, and so the culture celebrated Dr. Seuss by canceling him. I'm not making that up, gang. And what was even better is that it wasn't just one of the big tech corporate cyclopses that canceled him. It wasn't Amazon that decided out of the blue one day just to stop offering his books on their platform. No, this actually came from the very top. This came from Seuss Enterprises itself. This is from NPR. Headline: Dr. Seuss Enterprises will shelve 6 books, citing hurtful portrayals. Dr. Seuss Enterprises will cease publishing 6 of the author's books, including And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, If I Ran the Zoo. It also includes On Beyond Zebra, McElligot's Pool, Scrambled Eggs, Surprise, and The Cat's Quizzes, I believe. And McElligot's Pool, if I haven't mentioned that already. Those are the 6 books that are going to be canceled. Why, you might ask? Well, as the headline already hinted at, because they portray quote-unquote negative stereotypes. From Seuss Enterprises' announcement, they, the books, quote, portray people in ways that are hurtful and wrong. NPR says the books have been criticized for how they depict Asian and Black people. So, for example, and to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street on one page, on one single page, it shows a man in Oriental garb with a sort of a, I don't know what they call the men's tunics, a men's tunic, a Chinese male tunic, a conical hat, and he's carrying a bowl in one hand, and he's got a pair of chopsticks in the other. That is now a negative stereotype. In another book, If I Ran the Zoo, on one page, there is a pair of people from Africa, men from Africa, with no shirts, grass skirts, and no shoes. And this was also called a negative stereotype. So even though these two offensive, quote-unquote, only appear on one page of their respective books, the entire book has to go. The entire book has to go. And just to make sure that they have scrubbed everything offensive out, they've also gotten rid of McKilligot's Pool, On Beyond Zebra, Scrambled Egg Super, and The Cat's Quizzes. The Cat's Quizzer. This has gone beyond insane gang. In fact, this story, it seems ridiculous on the front, right? Because, I mean, canceling Dr. Seuss now, in the first place, as I said at the beginning, Dr. Seuss is one of the most successful and well-loved children's authors of all time. You pick up The Cat in the Hat, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, or heck, even On Beyond Zebra. I grew up with On Beyond Zebra, actually. I still remember that, along with The Lorax, The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins, Horton Hatches the Egg, Yertle the Turtle, all sorts of these books. There's nothing racist in them. So that makes it seem insane. And then, second of all, Dr. Seuss, the left, he's one of those guys that the left should actually be raising statues up. Because he was a dyed-in-the-wool progressive. He was a New Deal Democrat, backed FDR to the hilt and every single aspect of the New Deal, and then, even better, what would even tickle the cockles of leftists' hearts even more, Dr. Seuss, before he died, he passed away in 1991, and I don't know when exactly it was. It was the 70s or the 80s. I don't know the exact year, don't know the exact group, but he threatened to sue a pro-life group because they were starting to use his line from Horton Hears a Who. A person's a person, no matter how small. This pro-life organization was starting to use that line because it's actually, it gets down, it says so much in such a concise way. It's beautiful. It really is a beautiful line. A person's a person, no matter how small. Dr. Seuss threatened to sue them for using that line from his book. So at the very least, he had absolutely no problem with abortion, which is kind of ironic, a children's author being okay with children being killed before they're born, but that's another topic entirely. So what's going on here, gang? Well, in the first place, this isn't about Dr. Seuss. This is not about Dr. Seuss at all. This isn't about racism in his books or anything like that. This is about canceling Dr. Seuss, because when you can cancel Dr. Seuss, the person, okay, when you can cancel Theodore Seuss Geisel, his birth name, then you can get rid of all of his books. These 6 books that were canceled by Seuss Enterprises, and which now are impossible to find, you can't find these 6 books on Amazon. eBay also announced that it was no longer going to offer those books. So whatever books that they had in their storehouses, we don't know what's been going, we don't know what's happened to them. My bet is that they were put into huge barrels and then set on fire or buried in a landfill somewhere. You're only going to be able to find these books in used bookstores, maybe estate sales, garage sales, those sort of things. I don't know if you can order them overseas or not either. But, I mean, these books are now gone. They are just simply gone, gang. It was a digital bonfire. That's really the way to think about it. This was a digital bonfire. They didn't go out to the middle of the town square. They didn't put all of Dr. Seuss's books on a big pile and then set a match to it. But the effect is the same. You are no longer able to, you no longer have the ability to find to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street or McElligott's Pool or on Beyond Zebra. And this is, to go back to the point that I was originally going to make, this is just the first step. Anyone who thinks that it's just going to end with these 6 books is kidding themselves. Remember, the left is never satisfied with anything short of complete and total domination. The recent events of the past couple of months, even in fact, the getting on now to a year, should have proven that beyond a doubt. So if it's not about racism, if it's about just canceling Dr. Seuss, that raises the question, well, why would they want to cancel Dr. Seuss again? He was a leftist, a dyed-in-the-wool leftist. Because when you can cancel Dr. Seuss, you can cancel all of his books. All of them, not just these 6, all of them. And they want to do that so that then they can supplant Dr. Seuss books with woke books. For example, Ibram Kendi, whom we've talked about before here. He's a fraud, a huckster, and a racist. Ibram Kendi has said that the only way to atone for the racism in the past is with racism now. The only way to atone for the racism that was perpetrated against Black people in the past is to now actively perpetrate, I should say, racism against other ethnic groups today. We make up for the racism against Blacks in the past with racism against whites in the present, or racism against Asians, or racism against Hispanics. Okay? And he actually said this in his book, and he has actually said this. That is not a boiling down of a passage that was chock full of academic talk, and once you actually boiled that all away, that was the message that you were left with, the implication that was left. He has out and out said it. He has out and out said that that's what needs to be done, and people are now starting to take him at his word. They're taking him seriously. Just this past week on Twitter, I saw a woman, a Black woman, who put up on Twitter that people need to stop patronizing Asian businesses. Because if you patronize Asian businesses instead of Black businesses, well, that's racist. And someone in the comments said, that's racist. And her response, gang, was that, not verbatim, but her response was that I can't be racist because I'm Black. So it's impossible for me to be racist. This stuff is actually happening. Well, anyway, Ibram Kendi, his big claim to fame at the moment is a book he wrote called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And he, coincidence of coincidence, gang, has made that book into a children's illustrated book with cute little rhymes and illustrations and everything. His racist book, ironically called How to Be an Anti-Racist, is now a children's book. So imagine that. At the same time that Ibram Kendi says, hey, I've got this children's book based on my book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, now we have to get rid of Dr. Seuss. And don't doubt that they are going to cancel all of Dr. Seuss. The group that actually got this done, the group that has actually issued enough pressure so that Seuss Enterprises itself cancels the books of the very man whose legacy it exists to promote and defend. The group that got this done is called Learning for Justice. It's an auxiliary of the Southern Poverty Law Center, a project actually of the Southern Poverty Law Center. And on its blog, okay, they actually give the game away. Learning for Justice has a blog, and on their blog they talked about Dr. Seuss, and this is what Learning for Justice said, quote, "At Teaching Tolerance, we've even featured anti-racist activities built around the Dr. Seuss book, The Sneetches. But when we re-evaluated, watch out for that word game, we found that the story is actually not as anti-racist as we once thought. And it has some pretty intricate layers you and your students might consider too. The solution to the story's conflict is that the plain-bellied Sneetches and star-bellied Sneetches simply get confused as to who is oppressed. As a result, they accept one another. This message of acceptance does not acknowledge structural power imbalances. It doesn't address the idea that historical narratives impact present-day power structures. And instead of encouraging young readers to recognize and take action against injustice, the story promotes a race-neutral approach." That is from the Learning for Justice blog, a project of the Southern Poverty Law Center, which, by the way, is a hate organization itself. So there you have it. Dr. Seuss's books aren't racist. They don't even really address racism. And that's the problem, because they do not address structural power imbalances. And then, because they don't do that, they don't encourage kids to take action against injustices. In other words, reading Dr. Seuss's books won't actually propagate your kids to be woke parrot activists. And that is not acceptable anymore. They are saying in plain language what the goal here is, gang. Cancel Dr. Seuss, so then all of his books have to be canceled. Because, of course, if Dr. Seuss himself has to be canceled because he was a white supremacist and a racist, that means that none of his books can be trusted. All of his books are suspect. Because, of course, as a white oppressor, he would have, at the very least, unconsciously put in messages and ideas of white supremacy and white fragility, etc. into all of his books. Even something as innocuous as the 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins. Or the Lorax, which everyone used to ooh and ah over because it was one of the more explicit Seuss books. The message was pretty much right there on the nose. With the Lorax, I speak for the trees, for the trees have no tongues. Remember that? Danny DeVito was the Lorax a couple of years ago in that horrible movie. But because the Seuss books do not indoctrinate your children, don't indoctrinate any children, they're just there for entertainment. And maybe for some, be kind to everyone, some regular, what we would call old, sort of like 20th century fuzzy-wuzzy liberal messages. It's not good enough. That very fact makes them, quote-unquote, problematic. So this is where we have gotten, gang. The left is now telling us exactly what it wants to do. It wants the souls of your children. It wants all of our souls. Because take a look again at this passage. At Teaching Tolerance, that's what they used to call themselves. Learning for Justice is Teaching Tolerance. At Teaching Tolerance, we've even featured anti-racist activities built around the Dr. Seuss books, The Sneetches. But when we re-evaluated, we found that the story is actually not as anti-racist as we once thought. That is just as informative an admittance as what I read previously. Because what they're saying is that in the past, maybe even 2 years ago, a year ago even, The Sneetches, another of Dr. Seuss's books, was perfectly fine. It was even anti-racist. It was, dare I say it, woke. Now, after reevaluating it, it's racist. It's problematic. The very fact that it's not racist now makes it racist. And what that shows, gang, is that the left is out to destroy all of history. Every single blessed bit of it. They want us living in a never ending, ever-present, tyrannical, totalitarian present, the tyranny of the now, as I like to call it, where they control the now completely by continually reevaluating everything, even things that were, are just 50 years old. We're not talking about Confederate statues anymore or memorials to Thomas Jefferson. We're talking about a children's book written in the second half of the 20th century by a liberal, a New Deal, abortion-supporting Democrat. And even now, that's problematic. Everything is going to be discovered to be problematic in order so that everything can be destroyed, so that the now can be recreated in the left's image. That's what's happening, gang. That is what's happening. And just to circle back, that's becoming a popular phrase. I'm going to appropriate that to circle back on something that I said towards the beginning about this being a digital bonfire. It really is. This isn't about free speech. This isn't about free speech. Yes, I know. The usual suspects will say, oh, well, Seuss Enterprises can completely decide which books to publish and which ones not to publish. Amazon, eBay, they can completely decide what books to sell, what products to sell, which ones not, blah, 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 blah. We all know that that's a lie, gang. Because when the end result is that you can't even find these books. You can't even find these books. Oh, you can't find them on Barnes & Noble either, FYI. When you can't find these books at all, the goal is to memory hole them, which means that they don't want you to read them, which means they don't want you to think about them. It's a subtle form of mind control, gang. And it's becoming more and more iron-fisted as the days go on. And unless we actually admit what's happening, accept the fact with open eyes, and actually raise our fists against it, it's going to sweep everything in its path. Dr. Seuss first, you and me next. That is story number one.